And in particular, how is your pelvis relating to the ground? How much of your pelvis do you feel in contact with the ground? Pay attention to the length of your spine from your tailbone to your head. What sense or image forms now for you as you travel upwards with your attention, listening to how you relate to the floor from your spine, the ribs on either side of your spine, your head. And please bring your arms out to the side of you at shoulder height. Make soft fists with your hands. I say soft because throughout this lesson you're going to have your hand in a fist-like shape. So if you make strong fists, you could become very tired by the end of the lesson. Begin to roll both arms upwards on the floor and then come back to where you are. So now, rolling is not the same thing as sliding. So, start at shoulder height. Pause there. Feel what part of the back of your hand is in contact with the floor. Now in this lesson, if your hands are not at shoulder height, it's going to influence many things. So check whether your hands are at shoulder height or above shoulder height. And if your mat's slippery, you might want to be on the floor. No? So your legs are long at the moment, if it's comfortable. So, where do you feel the pressure on the back of your hand? Is it more on the little finger edge of your hand? More on the middle of the back of your palm? More on the thumb side edge of your hand? Could you begin to roll your arms? Check that your hands are not above the height of your shoulder. Have a look. Open your eyes. Have a look. Have a look. That your hands start out at shoulder height or a little below shoulder height. So you can sense where your hand is contacting the floor. Can you begin to roll your fists on the floor so that your little finger side of your hand, edge of your hand, begins to roll upwards towards the ceiling. And then come back. So it's a small movement. It's not a big movement. As you do that, notice how you feel that movement traveling through yourself from your hands, through the bones of your forearm, whether it passes through your elbows and you feel the humerus or the upper bone of the arm turning, and any signs of movement elsewhere. As you do that, watch if you do anything that interferes with your breathing. Do you turn both of your arms from your hands at the same speed? Or does one arm turn a little faster than the other, or a little slower than the other? What do you feel through the length of your arms, from your hand to your shoulder, from one shoulder to the other shoulder, from the other hand, again up into the shoulder on that side and through to the other shoulder? Okay, pause a moment. Please bend your knees and stand your feet. Take a moment to observe, sense, check. How have you placed your feet in relationship to one another and in relationship to yourself? How wide apart are your feet, or how close together? Is one foot closer towards your buttocks than the other? Or one foot further away? Do you feel like your feet can stand here clearly? And that if you were to fall asleep, your legs could stay standing? Babies do, you know. I mean, admittedly, they've got some slightly different dimensions of their body, but they can fall asleep and their legs can stay up. But most adults, through the bias of the use we have in our legs and the latent tension we have in the muscles, our legs wouldn't stay standing. For the most. Not all, some would, but many wouldn't. So leaving your arms quiet for a moment, begin to press your feet a little bit into the floor in order to roll your pelvis so that the upper part of your pelvis rolls backwards to the floor, towards the floor, and your coccyx lifts a little bit away from the floor. But it's a rolling action of your pelvis. And then come back down. Let your pelvis settle. Take a moment to observe how your pelvis is lying when it settles. And then explore that movement again. As you keep exploring that many times, just notice, do you feel any movement through the length of your spine in the direction of your head as you do this? You feel any subtle little slide of the back of your skull on the floor? So it's a small movement where you press your feet into the floor. Feel how that leaning of your feet into the floor can lift the lower end of your pelvis through the hip joints so that your pelvis rolls and tilts backwards. So it rolls in a headward direction, and your coccyx, your tailbone, as your pelvis rolls backwards and closer to the floor at the top end, the tailbone is tilting upwards away from the floor towards the ceiling. Notice how you're breathing as you do this. Try rolling your pelvis in the other direction. So if that means your tailbone will come closer to the floor and your back will lift a little bit away from the floor. The lumbar vertebra or the lumbar curve will increase a little bit. Which direction feels easier or larger? Lifting your lower back away from the floor, or lifting your tailbone and rolling the top of your pelvis backwards? Okay, leave it. Lengthen your legs and rest a moment. Please bend your knees and stand your feet again. How are you bringing your legs to stand? It's encouraging. Whether it's nice or not is kind of irrelevant, but you know, as a facilitator of your learning of the method, it's encouraging when you see people using what they've learnt about. And that will happen for you in classes too. When you teach a lesson and you see people walking in or sitting down or getting down to the floor in ways that you've explored in lessons, it can be a reflection of their learning. It could be a reflection of they want to please the teacher or the facilitator, but it's an opportunity to practice, to get more familiar with. Okay, so with your feet standing, you can put your arms out the side at shoulder height. You don't have to make soft fists at the moment. But let's explore the placement of your feet a little bit more. So the placement of your feet and how that affects your ability to roll your pelvis and lift your tailbone away from the floor a little bit. So try putting your feet very wide apart. So your feet would be outside the line of your pelvis or either side of your pelvis. And now press your feet a little bit in order that the pressing of the feet creates a force upwards through your leg into your hip joint that rolls your pelvis so that the hip joints are lifted, the tailbone lifts, and your pelvis rolls backwards. Your lower back gets closer to the floor. Do that several times. Now bring your feet very close together. Press your feet into the floor in a way that the movement travels through your hip joints, lifts the lower corners of your pelvis via the hip joints, rolls your pelvis backwards towards the floor. And then let it go and do that several times. Do you have any sense how that interferes with the movement or how it makes any difference to some sensation that you feel? So now spread your feet, put your feet somewhere between those two distances. And now explore the distance your feet are from your buttocks. So bring your feet very close to your buttocks. See what it's like to press your feet into the floor a little bit. Notice how this passes through your knees. When your feet are very close to your buttocks, is there any tendency for your knees to move a little bit away from your head, in the direction of away from your head? And do you use a different part of your foot to press when your feet are close to your buttocks than when your feet are further away from your buttocks? So try that now. Take your feet far from your buttocks, farther than you usually place them. And see what it's like to press, how easily you can press your feet into the floor here. And how that influences the tilting, the rolling of your pelvis. So check in. I might keep talking, but when we do these movements, when you're exploring yourself through movement, are you remembering to pause between one movement and the next? Some of you are, and some of you aren't. And when you keep moving backwards and forwards and backwards and forwards, there is so much sensory information that's going to your brain, through your nervous system, into your nervous system, it makes it more difficult to distinguish whether this is different to that, or whether something makes a difference and what that difference is. Please bend your legs again, stand your feet. It's nice to see you taking the rests though. Find a comfortable distance for your feet from your pelvis and from one another. And gently roll your pelvis a little forwards and a little backwards, using your feet. So your feet, you actually sense them. It's as if they're wanting to press down through the floor, and that pressing, you could just tense everything around your buttocks and hips so there wouldn't be any movement of your pelvis. But it is actually possible to press your feet into the floor in such a way movement travels through the bones of your legs into your hip joints, pushes your hip joints upwards in a way that rolls your pelvis backwards. Do your feet press the whole time your pelvis is rolling backwards? Do your feet lean into the floor equally? So make a small, gentle movement now, rolling your pelvis forwards and backwards. The amount that you could do the same in both directions. Gently, easily, slowly, so that you could listen to whether the line of pressure that your pelvis is drawing on the floor is along the midline of your body, along the middle of your sacrum at the back, or whether it's a little diagonal, or maybe it zigzags. And that could be as a consequence of several things. One of the elements that may lead to that, a more diagonal movement of your pelvis, even if it's only slight, is using your two legs differently. So pause from moving your pelvis. Okay, rest your legs. Notice if it's getting more pleasurable to slide your legs along. You're actually using gravity, using the floor, using the supporting surface. Please draw your legs to standing, so your soles of your feet on the floor. And press your left foot into the floor, just your left foot, and let it go. Begin to listen more and more to your left hip joint. You feel have any sense that as you press the floor, passes through your leg, and as your hip joint, or the bottom end of your pelvis, does it move headward parallel to the floor, or does it lift upwards a little bit? May or may not make sense to you, so you can just consider it. Where inside of you do you feel that your left leg pushes into your pelvis and moves your pelvis? It lifts your hip joint. You may feel your pelvis rolling diagonally and the right side of your pelvis leaning on the floor a little bit more. Now try it with your right foot, your right leg only. So your left foot stays standing, knee towards the ceiling. How is this side different? Observe the changing contact with the floor. How your pelvis tilts. And also pay attention to your spine, your thorax. Notice if you're accenting, if you're letting yourself pause between movements. Slower. Rest. Now. No, don't keep pushing harder. Little. It's very different, huh? So do less. Pause between every movement. So Moshe uses the example of continually doing movements and not letting the activity come to a settling place as like writing on a blackboard. You write on the blackboard a word once and maybe it's legible, and then you write on the blackboard again. And if you write over the top of that, maybe you can make out the second word. But if you keep on writing over and around it, you can't make sense of it. So when we keep on moving, it becomes harder to make sense of it. So can you alternate? Press once with your right foot and let it go. Once with your left foot and let it go. Imagining, sensing where your hip joint is and how your pelvis is rolled through this action. Try both feet together and just notice, do your feet really press simultaneously? Or does one come in after the other has started pressing? Every position of your feet, every position of your knees will affect the movement. It's a different organization, a different mobilization of yourself. Rest a moment. Please bend your knees again and stand your feet. This time bring your feet and knees together again. So the inside edges of your feet touch, knees together, and roll your pelvis so that your tailbone lifts away from the floor, the lower back presses towards the floor, and just begin to see, can you lift your pelvis that way as if it's your tailbone lifting first, your pelvis tilts backwards so you feel a pressure roll upwards along the back of your pelvis, and then maybe the first vertebra of your lower back lifts, and then lower down the same way. Just feel what's it like doing that with your feet and your legs together. So here, the very muscles with your legs together like this, the very muscles that you're wanting to use to effect the lifting of your pelvis, the rolling first and then the gradual lifting, are engaged in holding you, keeping you balance. So the muscles on the outside and inside of the hip joints will be working a little harder. So find the distance between your feet that you feel you can move your pelvis easily, and that in that very first small movement, as you begin to press your feet into the floor, you sense the movement travel upwards along the length of your spine to your head. So your feet are apart now, finding a comfortable distance apart for your feet. And you're gradually learning all the sensations connected, or many of the possible sensations, all you'd need to go on for the rest of your life, but that are connected to how you can organize yourself to lift your pelvis on standing feet. So you feel that as soon as you press your feet, the movement passes through your legs, hip joints, through your pelvis, into your spine, towards your head. And then as you continue pressing, your tailbone begins to lift. It's not that you keep going further and further headward, although you could. That's how some babies get along the floor. They push with the feet, and it scooches them along the floor in the headward direction. But we're not making that movement in order to find a new method of transport on the floor. We're doing it to find what's the beginning of that motion. You see babies doing that a lot too. And when we know what our pelvis can do and how it connects with the rest of ourselves, we can improve everything we do. So gradually lift your pelvis a little bit higher in this way. Just notice, what do your knees do in space? At a certain moment, do your knees start to distance themselves from your head, to move in the direction of above your feet? And can you gradually lift your pelvis a little higher? And if it doesn't feel easy, then try adjusting the position of your feet further apart, closer to your buttocks. Usually it's not closer together and not further away. Excuse me. So pay attention. Can you feel your knees? So you press with your feet, your pelvis rolls backwards, your coccyx lifts. Not yet, it's okay. Pelvis is tilting backwards, yeah. But at the same time, at a certain point, when your pelvis tilts backwards, keep going, tilt your pelvis backwards, your knees, to lift your pelvis higher, your knees are going to go away from you. Okay. So let's pause for a minute and come and have a look at the skeleton. I'm going to bring it next to you because you've got the place closest to the camera, if I may. Sure. And then I'll use you afterwards. So when we're looking for an organisation that can support us and also change its relationship to the floor, we think of standing the feet. Standing the feet, that's it's supporting the legs in this position. But from here, if you want to lift your pelvis, roll your pelvis backwards and then begin to lift it away from the floor. You see how the skeletons of legs are coming, the lower leg is coming more to vertical? So if the legs are here, you can't do that. You've not got a vertical part of the skeletal structure that can take the weight down through the bones. You've got to do a lot more work in your hamstrings, as you've already felt, in order to lift your legs there. It's like it's an inefficient position. In this position, you press the floor with your feet, and that movement passes through the hip joint into the pelvis and rolls the pelvis backwards. Now, if you want to keep lifting the pelvis higher so that you've rolled the pelvis, you've lifted the bottom end of the pelvis. If you want to lift more of the pelvis and then more of the lumbar spine chain, his curve isn't changing, but you need to feel secure for your gluteal muscles, your big muscles of your pelvis, to be able to lift your skeleton like this. And this is the direction we're going in. And in order to do that, if my legs are like that, what do you think? No. Okay.
Can't take
biomechanically it can't transfer the
weight.
Yeah, and
that one upright in order for that to happen without effort.
That's right. So this, not so good. So this, you've got to use these muscles to balance you because you haven't got as big a base of support. So can you see here that imagine the pelvis is rolling first, but as you keep pressing, in order to keep pressing, look what his knees are doing. They're coming this way. Moshe talks about a standing leg being one that you can sit on and that can take anybody's weight. No. If I've got him aligned, I can put my weight there and I won't break his leg at all. You are about to try that. Now, so we'll just, Simon, would you mind lying down on your mat? Actually, I just want a pad. There's not a pad. One of the thin pads. It's a thin, yeah. Lie on your back, please. Beside him. Thin. I want one of the really thin ones. You can do it a thick one. Okay, so let's just look at how Simon organises himself for this. So we've also, which we didn't include, thank you Chris, we've got the orientation of his feet. You could see there's a slight variation if you look over here in the direction of his feet.
Make the transference of the power through the knee different as well.
Yes.
So this is the foundation.
It can.
Yeah.
It can. But a bunion per se.
Not necessarily, but the way you put
The weight on the foot in the
line of
exactly, left or right
Yeah.
of the line of the foot.
So if you've got fallen arches like me, you've got to maybe figure out.
What Anka's saying about, I think this or this. Yes. The arch itself is probably a relationship to how you use your foot, not an issue. You can still find the centre of your foot, whatever shape your arch is, whatever shape your foot is.
That this foot has a bunion on it,
Mhm.
and it affects my balance enormously.
And that's partly why you'll start to orient your foot, because you're creating solutions to something that's difficult for you, which may or may not serve you. Who knows? Often we make them local when they'd be more effective if they're made centrally. But easier to think we're changing something here. So to begin with, Simon's legs aren't vertical. That's fine. Let's have a look how you do it. Could you put your head down and press your feet into the floor? Roll your pelvis, yep. So, and keep rolling it up so you begin to lift it. Yep, but his knees are coming towards me, okay? And go back down again. Can you see that? That his knees came towards me? And there they're going back. But let's try. Let's try. Mm-hmm. Did that look easier? Yeah. So, it's very easy to think, and thank you, and down. To think we've found the right distance, but we've got to keep on playing. Did it feel easier to you?
Yeah.
Simon? So, you're looking for where is the lower leg vertical so that the foot can press, the force can go through the pelvis. The other thing that I described, wasn't so specific, is you want the leg in a plane. So if the knee is out there, the leg is no longer in a vertical plane or held within a vertical plane. As if he had a door on either side of his leg and everything falls within that plane. So if I put your leg out, take your knee, see, that's not vertical anymore. It's angled. The plane's angled, and the same that way. So we're looking for this vertical plane that includes the hip joint, the knee joint, and the ankle joint, and the lower leg to be vertical. Are you happy for me to have a go at sitting in your...
Yep.
I'll choose the easier one. Okay. So put your head down and just see how you can lift your pelvis. So it hardly interferes because my weight's going down through his leg. How was it for you? Did it feel like it interfered? Did I feel like I interfered? Great for me too, Simon. Thank you. Okay. So could you get together with a partner and just explore that?
You like that? I'm sitting on your knee, love. I'm sitting on your leg.
But first of all, you don't sit on the leg, okay? You look at the positioning of the feet, the lifting of their pelvis, the plane of their leg, and the direction of their knees. You can be in a three. I'll sit on your leg. You can sit on mine.